to me, it's the embodiment of graphic design. You have to think about the subject matter for which you are attempting to emote a a message, right? Like you're attempting to communicate something through the sheer ubiquity of letter form. So is that something to be read fast? Is it supposed to be read slow? Um, is it supposed to feel elegant or is it supposed to feel messy? And when we think about graphically designed compositions, we do put things together in that same similar fashion. Lettering though just happens to be a less formal system of letters together.
Welcome to Kudos AMPM, a podcast exploring the future and impact of design innovation in the intersection of business, technology, and art. I'm your host, John Kudos. Welcome to the AMPM podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's so interesting because we made so much plans around today's recording. And of course, you being a designer, an educator, a typographer, like you're a person wearing many hats, but you are first and foremost a father of three.
Yes. Yeah, has been a topsy-turvy one. I was I had a birthday yesterday. I turned 43, and my
Happy
son
birthday.
called. Thank you, thank you. My son called yesterday and said, "Parents, I need to be picked up on the 5th from college, or else there'll be a fine."
The fifth is tomorrow,
The the
according to
fifth
the
is
calendar.
the fifth is tomorrow.
Okay, so it's
Um,
either pick me up or you pay for the fine.
yeah, yeah. And my mother-in-law will be here. Is flying to New Haven on the 5th.
Hmm.
So it was either a fine or today. So today was a pickup, a move out, and yeah, a full day's drive to go pick him up and bring him back.
Okay, so where are you?
Okay,
Where are you based now?
so I'm in Hamden, Connecticut, which nobody probably knows, but I'm next door to New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale University sits.
Okay, so I'm in New York. So it's 10 p.m. here. I think it's the same time zone for you and me today.
Yes.
Now, I think it's a proper introduction is appropriate here. So for those
Okay.
who don't know who you are, can you say a few things about yourself?
All right. So I'll start with my name. My name is David Jon Walker. My father was a David LaRon Walker, and my son is a David Jaron Walker. So no juniors, no seconds, no first or thirds. So we're all one of one. Um,
So if I say David, three guys will turn their heads.
yes, but in the house, no, just one would turn their head.
Okay.
Yeah, because in at home we all go by. Well, my dad went by his first name. I went by my first and middle name, and my son goes by his middle name only.
Hmm.
At home, but yes, I'm a father of three. So 19, 16, and 5 years old, um, which is the full spectrum and gamut of parenthood all at once, which is quite fascinating and terrifying at the same time,
Hmm.
but a lot of fun. Um, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and grew up there. Went to college, undergraduate there at Tennessee State University. It's a historically black college university. Um, and then did an MFA at the University of Memphis in web design,
Ooh,
and
sounds
and
like
then
mine.
and then began teaching
Hmm.
from 2011 to 2021. yeah, and became a tenured professor. Took a leave of absence to go back to school at the Yale School of Art for graphic design again. But my focus this time was letter form and typography design.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of transitions in your life. So, I mean,
Yeah,
can we just go back to Nashville, Tennessee? Like,
yeah.
why? Okay, you started there. It's college, right? So, I'm sure you started there for a reason, right? I mean, you grew up there. But what made you start looking elsewhere?
I don't necessarily think I was looking.
Hmm.
It kind of found me. So two things. Tennessee State is the HBCU, or historically black college and university. And I got my studio art degree with a. I was telling people an emphasis in graphic design, but we were only offered two classes, which was digital imaging and intro to desktop publishing. So, you graduate with two classes in graphic design. There's nowhere that will hire you as a designer because you don't have a portfolio. So my first instinct was to just go and get a job. Um, I was blessed 6 months after, or really 5 months after graduating undergrad, with my first child. So going to get a job actually
You
wasn't
got to
real.
start
Yeah.
early there as a father, didn't you?
Yes. I mean, I was 23 when he was born.
Okay.
So yeah, in some places that's very early, and in other places that's kind of normal.
Well, I
Um,
mean, it took me a while to get my first one, so you're way ahead of the game for me.
yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it has helped shape the trajectory,
Mm,
right? Like, had I not had a kid so soon, I would have been looking for jobs and possible opportunities, and it may have taken me longer, right? So, with a kid in tow, not going after a job, I became an entrepreneur, and things that I learned in art school, how to screen print, how to communicate to vendors. I started a screen printing business and
mhm,
started selling T-shirts and things of that nature. And clients started asking for additional things. Oh, well, if you're designing T-shirts, can you design flyers and posters
mhm,
and other collateral?
mhm.
And I was meeting those needs with a kid in tow. I was a stay-at-home parent for the first 4 years of my son's life, the first year of my daughter's life before I went to graduate school. So graduate school was a means to an end, like being
This
qualified
is
to,
not any graduate school, right? I mean,
I mean, at the University of Memphis was the first one, right? That's
mhm,
2008. And, you know, the recession hit and I was
mhm,
in school and had a stipend.
mhm,
I was able to support and provide for my family in that way. And then once I came out in 2011, I landed my first teaching job, teaching web design at Middle Tennessee State University.
mhm.
Um, and taught for a while and ended up being hired at another institution, Austin P State University, where I taught there for 4 years and was awarded tenure. Um, and then the pandemic hit, right? So
Mm,
the pandemic was a grand reset for all. Um, the year before the pandemic, my third child arrived.
mhm, mhm.
So, um, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I think you knew the
he was
pandemic was coming, and like, let's just have another
I
one.
mean, let's shake it up, right? So yeah, he arrived in 2019.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, March of 2020, I almost get stuck abroad with my older two kids on a study abroad trip to London. Like we got back with a couple hours left before the border closed. Like we were concerned that the plane would our flight would be canceled.
Wow.
So like we were like very, very, very close to the cutoff. So much so that TSA, we're walking through. They're like, "Welcome home."
You
uh,
made it home.
yeah, we made it home. I mean, the optimism of the kids
Yeah.
they were of the belief that if we got stuck in London, that I would have friends that would host us for the unforeseeable future.
Except
Then,
back
I
then, they
mean,
didn't know it was going to be X number of years.
yeah, yeah, not a year and a half of lockdown and not going anywhere, or them being in school, right, for a year and a half. So over that COVID time, I began a couple practices. One was a running practice where I run every day. A second was a practice where I decided that people didn't necessarily know what I did as a designer. People knew me as a professor. I had started to give talks at professional teaching organizational conferences and that kind of thing. So CAA, the College Art Association, CCAC, what is this, Southeastern Collegiate Art Conference. I was speaking at things of that nature, and then being invited by other professors to speak at their schools and give workshops and things of that sort. So, you know, I was speaking on what I was teaching, but I wasn't talking about what I was doing as a designer, and people just knew me, as a professor. Like, oh, well, what do you do? It's like, oh, I build websites, or oh, I do branding, or oh, I, just make collateral things. Um, so with that, I thought, I think this time would be perfect for me to, in a way, emerge as a designer and not as a design educator. So what I started doing, April of 2020, was posting work online based on political things, because things were very political at the time, and everybody was in the house and kind of stuck. So I began posting stuff online, just graphic images. I mean, graphic images as far as like commentary on political stuff, COVID things, decisions that the government was making, decisions that individual states were making, um, around COVID, around policies and things of that
They're not
nature.
just graphic images, though. I think they were really sketchy. Like you were using hand
Oh,
tools,
well,
right?
the first part. So I was like, for the first, this had to have been like April 1st, right? And I was just posting Photoshop renderings of things. Like, I would collage a piece together and then put it up there. Um, so it kind of dawned on me, hey, like, there are things that you're interested in that you haven't done, but maybe you could try. And that there were a few things on the list. One was hand lettering. Second was motion design. Third was video editing, getting deeper into that. Well, with three kids in the house and a spouse and a dog, and having to figure out and juggle time, the easiest one to lean into was hand lettering. So on, gosh, I'd say April 29th, I started a hand lettering challenge with Mary Kate McDevitt, who's a pretty well-known letterer and typographer, and Simone Wilder, who's also a pretty well-known lettering artist. This 15-day "What did you miss?" or "What do you miss?" challenge. So every day for 15 days, you letter something that you miss about life pre-COVID. And so I talked about things like, I miss my students, I miss seeing my mom, I miss getting haircuts, I miss going out for drinks on Cinco de Mayo. Like, it's just all kind of random things over these 15
Yeah.
days. Um, and so on day 16, I just continued lettering. Well, this practice ended up going on for, I don't know, another couple hundred days,
Oh,
right?
from
So
15 days to a couple hundred days. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, to a couple hundred, yeah.
You
Um,
have to do things in hundreds. I notice.
I mean, I kind of want to see at this point, like, I kind of want to see it through, right? Like, start a thing, see how it goes, and if it feels good, keep doing it. If it doesn't, then, move on. Um, so I think I had done a hand lettered narrative, for lack of better terms, like a poem, on like George Floyd's passing, but it wasn't necessarily about him. It was more so about my relationship, you know, with my mom and my mom's relationship with my son, and how, as black males, she's still concerned about us and our futures,
Mm.
right? Like safety is a
Hmm.
thing. So I lettered this thing. Oh, and the caveat to doing these graphic things were to post them on Instagram. A low stakes maneuver to not feel pressure to update a portfolio website, which I still need to do. So I started like just posting something, right?
I'm glad you think of Instagram as low pressure because I think most influencers spend so much time just to get the right posts up there.
Well, to me, one of the bigger headaches of being a designer is deciding what your online presence is going to be.
Hmm.
And it's even harder to design for yourself. So I'm looking at my website. I hate it. I still hate my website. At some point, I think I'm gonna ask a friend, like, "Hey, can you like build a template?" And I just drop stuff
Hmm.
in. Um, but instead of doing that, I said, "Well, if I upload stuff to the website, it's not really getting traffic. Nobody's gonna see it. So let me just go ahead and post low stakes, be brave, put something out there,
Hmm.
and see what happens." So I posted this narrative piece to Instagram, and somebody from Fine Acts Co., which is like an international nonprofit based out of Bulgaria, um, one of the founders was a past Obama humanitarian
Hmm.
fellow. Asked I want to say it was 11 other designers, letterers, to letter a piece, to be part of an exhibition and a free poster giveaway for protest. And so we had like uh, 24 protest
Mm.
posters. And so I submitted one, others submitted two. And from then on, I'm like, oh wow, like I've not really done this. Like somebody asked me to do lettering work, and I'm enjoying
Yeah.
it. And so I was doing something every day. You had folks like John Lewis passed, who
Mm.
was a iconic civil rights leader, and then later on a congressman, and then Reverend C.T. Vivian, who also was a civil rights icon. And I was lettering based on things,
Hmm.
political stuff, or paying homage and honoring people that had passed on. Um, and so it was starting to get traction. People were starting to share it, and I was having fun. And I'm seeing progress, and seeing the hand and the eye connection, um, become a thing, because it was a lettering as a time constraint. Um, and again, thinking about low
Hmm.
stakes, I had an unopened iPad that the school had given me as part of my startup package for teaching, that I never opened. I had a Apple Pencil, and I
Uh-huh.
said, "Well, I mean, no time's better than the present to try this thing out."
Hold on.
Um,
But you didn't start with the iPad. You started on paper first, right?
no, I started with the iPad,
Oh, interesting.
and so yeah, I mean, it's just been a story and a love of identifying some things that were always in my past that I really didn't
Yeah.
lean into.
It's a really interesting relationship to typography because you and I serve on the board of the Type Directors Club at this time, right?
Yeah,
And for the longest time, I never considered lettering as a category because it was always about there's graphic design or communication design, whatever you want to call it. And then there's the type
yeah,
design, right? People who actually make the typefaces and so on. But recently, I can't remember, maybe in the last 5 years or so, that's when lettering, it becomes its own category. You start seeing really interesting
Yeah.
murals, and then it's there's some graphic design in there, there's some type in there, but it's its own thing. It's like, is it graffiti? Like
Yeah.
there's like this kind of organic quality to it that you just cannot categorize in the same buckets.
Yeah. I mean, what I find fascinating, interesting is that it is, to me, it's the embodiment of graphic design. You have to think about the subject matter for which you are attempting to emote a a message, right? Like you're attempting to communicate something through the sheer ubiquity of letter
Hmm.
form. So is that something to be read fast? Is it supposed to be read slow? Um, is it supposed to feel elegant or is it supposed to feel
Hmm.
messy? And, when we think about graphically designed compositions, we do put things together in that same similar fashion. Lettering, though, just happens to be a less formal system of letters together. I mean, they're still letters together. They're not all the same, right? You can adjust scale, you can adjust size, you can adjust contrast across across the word in a way that it is definitely communicating something that just a word in however many letters in the same normal or bold weight would only communicate or potentially only communicate
Hmm.
the meaning of the word versus the letters kind of stinging in a way and communicating something else.
Now, earlier you mentioned you sort of developed this identity as a design professor, right? People kind of know you as that. And you decided to cross the chasm, right? Now hopefully you're a designer first. Now, I spent a great deal of my years as a designer first. And then I would say
Yeah.
maybe 8 years ago, I started, I guess, answering that call where I feel like I need to start, passing down some information, some knowledge. So it to me, it's interesting, because I'll start with my own experience. When I started teaching, it was a moment for me to have to reset myself in a way. Uh, I feel like we're like the complete opposite in this case. But for me, it was a reset to sort of pick up, my basic skills and sort of try to explain it in a way that makes sense to students, right? So all the learned muscles, if you will, right? Like this is how you design, you just know it in your hand, in your head. And then now you have to put it in words and actually get people to understand that. I imagine this is very different from you because I think you're going into this from the opposite direction for me.
For me, I didn't necessarily have well, not necessarily. I definitely did not have the design pedagogy that you came
Hmm.
with, right? Like you went to Micah, you had multiple levels of graphic design class. So by the time you came out, you were armed with all of these different
Hmm.
tools, right? Like typography, illustration, word and image, um, maybe video production, not video production, but graphic design
Hmm.
production skills that you were ready and a portfolio that
Hmm.
supported that. I didn't have that. I had my two classes and then I had my clients and had to build a practice from there. Right. So in a lot of ways, I've been chasing the education that I didn't get,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
right? Through through these different platforms. Like go to graduate school for web design or for graphic design, but I had a professor who his thing his specialty was web design, so
Hmm.
that's what we learned. Had it been a typographer, then we would have been
Hmm.
learning type, right? So when I came out of school, I was well versed and well armed in web design teaching jobs were available for web design, I was now able to go and sell web design as a product. Um, but I didn't through graduate school get again that graphic design curriculum that would have been had in a VFA program
Mm.
like you had. And so I've continued to search and go after, these learning opportunities. Even coming to Yale, I'm in graduate school again, or went to graduate school again, to
Hmm.
learn more, right? So now I'm like, okay, so maybe now I can be seen as a designer. Now I can go practice. Now I don't necessarily have to teach. I can be a practicing designer that doesn't necessarily rely on teaching while I'm teaching students and teaching myself, right? These things I can kind of be, um, in my own mind more confident about the skills that I've learned over time to now deploy, you know, publicly and to businesses and to I don't know, nonprofits and other entities. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, when did you move to Connecticut?
So I moved to Connecticut in July of 2021.
Okay, and that's when you started your study at Yale.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you feel like being in close proximity to Yale, right, influences your practice as an artist and designer?
Um, well, I've not necessarily been away from it yet, right? I did a fellowship, a artist in residency,
Hmm.
for the year 2023 to 2024, on Yale's campus. So I've done exhibition design and done book design and done other projects. And so the proximity is, yeah. I mean, I've been on the campus, yeah. So, so I've been located there for the past, for the past 3 years.
I mean, you were involved in the exhibit design, right, at the New Haven Museum. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm actually wearing a shirt,
Oh,
um,
look at
the based on the 1831 college. So I designed a seal for this college that would have been, it didn't become, it would have been the first HBCU in the country had it not been voted down by Yale administrators and New Haven
wow.
townspeople.
Okay, knowledge is
Um,
power, man.
yeah,
That's it. Yeah.
knowledge is power. And but the exhibition is titled "Shining Light
Hmm.
on Truth: um, New Haven, Yale, and Slavery," and so it digs into the historical past of Yale and New Haven and the ubiquity of those two, um, and the fact that Yale is like practice hagiography, right? They've only told the good parts of their
Hmm.
history and not the not so good parts of their history, like many other institutions of higher learning that were founded around the around the birth of
Huh? Yep.
America, right? So, um, so Yale being the second
Hmm.
oldest behind Harvard, yeah, I mean, I want to say 10, no, 9 out of the first 10 presidents of Yale, or is it 10? It's 10 out of the first 11 presidents at Yale owned
Mm.
slaves, and the administrators owned slaves, and they built the first building on Yale's campus by loaning out their slaves to erect, Connecticut Hall. And so this exhibition decenters the administrators and the presidents of Yale, because there's also a book uh, titled
Hmm.
Yale and Slavery, which talks specifically in a narrativized history about, the administrators. And so the exhibition speaks more to New Haven and Yale and the communities and Black resistance and abolition and memory, the memory of like there's a monument on Yale's campus dedicated
Hmm.
to the Civil War, and in the words of our convicted president,
Oh my
convicted
God.
ex-president,
Yeah. It's very timely.
there were good guys on both sides. Yeah, yeah. In the words of that guy, there were
Mm.
good guys on both sides, and so there's a lost cause memorial on campus where there are names of Confederate soldiers and Union soldiers who were both Yale students that died in battle, and their names are chiseled in stone
Mm.
on the wall. And yeah, people just walk past that without the knowledge of what that is or why, right? Um, and so this exhibition is meant to kind of bring
Yeah.
that history forward and to yeah share the true narrative of who Yale has been and what they were.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of research and history that you have to unravel, right? In this process of you designing for the exhibit. Can you maybe talk more about what you had to do, or did you have to engage different groups of people to actually propose ideas that make sense? I just want to understand more how you actually tackled the exhibit project.
Well, I'm good friends with a librarian who also serves as the director of community engagement at the Beinecke Library for manuscript and rare books. And so he serves on the Yale and Slavery task force. And he asked me if I would be willing to think about and work on or collaborate on an exhibition. So he was voluntold um, that in addition to the book, there needed to be additional vehicles to share this information, and an exhibition being one. And so he had seen an exhibition that I had put together for students of color in the art department, aptly titled Cousins. And he enjoyed that show and said, "Hey, I think it would be worth a conversation." So we sat down and talked about it. And his co-curator, Charles Warner Jr., Michael Morand is the director of community engagement. Um, he and Charles Warner um, sat down with me and we had a meeting to talk about the curatorial content for the exhibition, of which, they gave me a few folders to look through. Then we talked about the tent poles of the exhibition. And from there, I started to think about ways to, physically display, what they had given me, through images, through narratives, um, and through artifacts. And even, thinking about a a future narrative of a futurist narrative of this college that
Hmm.
would have been, right? Like how to think about um, creating a space that people could feel the presence of and the absence of an institution, right? So in this way, like, and then also thinking about where this place was sited. So they shared with me that it would be sited at the New Haven Museum. It would be within a rotunda space, which is a round room, and then an auxiliary room off of the rotunda space, and then dealing with the challenges and benefits of the architecture itself. And so, thinking about how to exemplify something that didn't exist. Yeah, I wanted to think up, how can I wrap people and bathe people in a history and a historical narrative that, like books, can seem
Mhm.
mythological, right? So anytime we read a nonfiction or a fictional book, we're relying on, our imaginations and our lived experiences to kind of color a picture or paint a picture for us, um, so we can, feel the
Mhm.
emotions of what we're reading. And, for this, they're like, "Oh, well, it was so long ago." It's like, well, kind of wasn't that long ago. Like we're still living the effects of the futures that these people, um, intended for us to be in. Like we are participants in their future. I mean, they're not here, but we are active participants in that thing. So we can either roll with it or we can, do things to mitigate some of the damage that's been done. Um, yeah, but thinking about an exhibition, it really was about bringing materiality and physicality forward. So like one of the things I did was to work with Dugal, who is a production house, exhibitions production house in New York. I'm sure you're familiar with, like they work
I
for
think they produce all amazing things. Oh yes.
all the stuff. Yeah, I mean, and they were a reference from a friend of mine that works at the Guggenheim. And they also produce for the Whitney and the Met and other, larger institutions. And so, for this show, I wanted to bring in materiality. I had them print some of the narrative on fabric, to bring into context like the work that people at that time were doing. I also brought in a piece of wood. So I was able to collaborate with a black lumberjack who graduated from Morehouse College, um, and construct a place to display slave ads, slave advertisements that were printed in newspapers at that time, of which in the archives and collections were over 300 different ads in newspapers that were in the archive. So these are things that are like accessible. It's not like hidden history. It's in a library. If you request it, they bring it out freely. There's not a special code, and everything is on view. And so, yeah, I wanted to bring that forward to say, like, hey, like, if you turn the page or if you make a request, the librarian will bring it out to you, and it's right there, for you to consume, digest, and
Yeah.
be moved by.
Your mention of engaging the materiality, right, in this design process. I remember when I think we had a casual chat months ago, and I think you were showing me a picture of a 3D sculpture of a type that you did.
Three-dimensional sculpture
Yeah.
type. Yes. So I was approached. It's funny. Um, back to this hand lettering stuff. So I'm putting this stuff online, posting on Instagram, and a guy in Knoxville, Tennessee, Brian Job of TriStar Arts, calls and says, "Hey, like I'm loving the work that you're doing. We should sit down and have a chat." Now, mind you, this is like shortly after I posted that I was going to
Okay.
be attending Yale. And he says, "Hey, I've got an idea. Have you ever thought about working with type in a sculptural
It
fashion?"
sounds cool.
And I
What does that
said,
mean?
"Yeah." I'm like, no. I'm like, we're working digitally on two-dimensional type. So he says, I think you should um, think about it. And, if you're game, I'll feature you and another artist in a show. And I said, oh, I said, well, yeah, sure. Let me see. Um, so I started sketching some stuff out. After I got to Yale, he asked if I had thought any more about it, and I told him yes. Um, and that I wanted to get past my first semester in school before actually starting to work on it. So what I ended up doing and producing was a 8 foot tall by 3 foot wide, four-sided sculpture that played with the juxtaposition of two words, stayed and stayed. So STAID, which is about like respectability and consistency. Um, and then the other word STAYED, right? STAYED, stayed. The past tense of stay or the choice of staying, thinking about the history of African Americans in the context of the United States. So, at some point in American history, persons of color or Africans who now were African Americans had the choice um, to start a colony in Africa, which is known as Liberia. And so the United States government was paying them to go over and have their own country on African soil.
I
And
just
it's
the thought
English.
of that is, I don't know what to make of it.
I mean, it's kind of crazy to think
Well,
you were brought over enslaved and now you're being shipped over to another place, uh, shipped back to your motherland or being paid to go back to your motherland and and colonize colonize that space that you're originally from, or closer
yeah.
to the region that you're originally from, devoid of devoid of the culture that you were stripped from. um and then that in contrast with folks that did stay in America and chose not to go, right? Because that was a foreign land that was unfamiliar and things of that nature. um that you think about the respectability of the respectability and honor and the dichotomy of being a person of color in America and attempting to survive, right? So thinking about being respectable but also choosing to stay in that space. And so this sculpture is four-sided, um and it's open. And so it's four sheets of rolled sheet metal where the lettering is cut, plasma cut, out of the sheet metal and then welded together in order for it to stand. And so yeah, I constructed that or produced that on campus and shipped it to Tennessee, and it went on display.
No, it's cool, because I think I as a designer, I also think about design as a way to form things, but the actual format, medium could change, depending on what you're trying to say, right? So I want to focus on two things now.
All right.
One is motivation, and then the second is commitment, right? Now, it's funny because the first time I heard your name, I forgot who said this, but someone basically told me that you had run every morning nonstop. And before this podcast recording, I looked up your Instagram just to double check. And I think on January 1st this year, 2024, you said that you've
Mhm.
crossed 1,000 consecutive days of running. All right, so let's talk about your motivation. Like, how do you keep that up?
It's about momentum and thinking about something as mundane as running. It gives you time away from everybody else to have thoughts to yourself. So I started this during the pandemic. Shortly after I started lettering and posting stuff to Instagram, a friend of mine challenged me to do a 30-day, 1 mile a day challenge.
Stop. Someone
And
just challenged you again. You were doing a 15-day challenge. This was a 30-day challenge. And let me guess, you haven't stopped running since.
no, today is day 1508. Yeah.
Okay, that's like 50% more than your record on January 1st.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, well, no, the 1,000 days was, let me see, January 13th of 2023.
You have a calendar behind you with the check mark?
No, you see the 1,000 over
Yeah.
here?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I was still in school. I hadn't graduated yet. And so people were kind of keeping up with me. And a good number of my friends and classmates ran day 1,000 with me. So it was cool. Um, but yeah, so a friend, I challenged two letterers to the 15-day lettering challenge of a best friend of mine, Dario Springfield, challenged me to do this 30-day running thing. So we got on this journey and we did day one and posted, and then day two and posted, and then we got to day 30 and posted. Um, and then day 31 came and I posted and he said, I guess we're still doing this. And we just said, well, we'll just see where it goes. So we got to 60 days, we got to 90 days, we got to 120 days, and we got to 365. And the Grand Running Club group who posted the Mile a Day challenge then interviewed me, him, and another guy, um, for our motivations for running. And so we just kind of talked about the changes that we were seeing by making this single choice every morning to do something that we
Mm.
didn't want to do. And because we're doing something daily that we don't want to do, everything across the rest of the day is actually
Mm.
easy.
Yeah.
2022, October of 2022, I was a panelist on a AIGA
Mhm.
conference speaking stage. And it was in Seattle, Washington. The morning of the panel, because I run outside, I don't do treadmills and that kind of thing. The morning of the conference, well, mind you, we get out there and there were like forest
I
fires
was trying to decide if you're telling me about
coming
the
right out of the
rain,
mountains.
the crazy blizzard. Okay, it's the forest fire.
I
Got it.
mean, yeah, it was the forest fires. Like I'm flying into Seattle, I'm seeing fire over here, and the place I'm going is over there, and I land over there, but there's smoke
Hmm.
everywhere. Like it was apocalyptic. Like there's just a haze. So I ran in a COVID mask for part of the day. Now, on the day that my panel was due, that morning it was raining cats and dogs. I mean, it was bad. And I get outside, I'm thinking, okay, if I wake up a little earlier, typically it doesn't, well, in Tennessee, well, in New Haven, it doesn't
But you were
rain
in
typically in
Seattle,
the
so it's
mornings.
a different world.
I'm like, all right, it won't be that bad. So, I mean, it was just really, really coming down. And I put my shoes on, put my jacket on, got outside, ran 2 miles, not one, ran two, and then had a fantastic panel. Like all the nerves of being in front of all these people talking about what we were talking about, designing
Hmm.
democracy and designing for political candidates or designing for PACs or designing for political initiatives. All the nerves for that talk went away because I had been beat up by the rain prior to me doing this thing. And so many, yeah, I mean, every day there's something, whether it's a kid issue, whether it was the academic stuff, due dates, all that kind of stuff, because the running is difficult and it's something that's internal. Um, and everything else is external. So if I can handle myself, then everything else should come pretty
Yeah,
easy.
I run too, but it's been a while. So I have to find that motivation, I think.
No, I mean, what's kind of crazy is this year. So I challenged myself this year on January 1st. I ran 3 miles and wanted to do a 5K and kick off the year. Second day, January 2nd, I did 2 miles. January 3rd, I did 3 miles because it was the third day of the year. And after the third, I challenged myself to finish out the month
Mhm.
at least doing 3 miles a day just to see. I said, you know what? I think I can try and get 100 miles this month. So got 100 miles. And because I had run the 30 days at 3 miles, so far to date this year, I've not run anything less than a 5K. And I'm like on pace to break all of my yearly mileage records because I've only run 5Ks every day of the week this year.
Yeah, that's a 30-minute run, right?
Well, if it's not snowing, then it's 30 minutes. I mean, if it is
Right.
snowing,
If
it's
it's
30
not
minutes. If it's not
snowing, if
snowing,
there's not forest fire behind you, right?
oh yeah, it's faster.
Anything could happen.
Yeah, yeah. So like this month, I'm averaging between 7:30 and 8 minutes a mile. So 20 minutes out of
Hmm.
my life is not much, and that's just how I couch it. Like, and that's what started on the doing the 1 mile. If you can run a mile in 8 minutes or run a mile in 9 minutes,
Yeah.
that's really not that much time, to dedicate
Yeah.
to putting in a
Yeah.
little
I
work for yourself.
yeah. I got to yeah, I gotta get on that bandwagon, David. All right. So the second
All
part,
right,
right?
commitment.
Commitment, right? I mean, I don't know, just listening to your life journey and where you are now, even the projects that you've been involved in, I think there's always a sense of your commitment to the narrative, the story, the history, even looking into your personal identity as a person of color, right? Um, Maybe talk to me more about that. Like, I mean, what drives you to gravitate towards always telling that story?
Again, I think, again,
Hmm.
back to chasing education, right? Like, without a story, I wouldn't have a story. And in doing work and finding projects, a lot of these projects that I'm looking at
Hmm.
have a narrative that I can lean into. It's I like yourself, like, you have a penchant for learning. I have a penchant for learning. If there's a historical narrative to it or a good story, it's worth talking about. It's worth digging into. It's worth researching. And if there's a project behind it, um, you know, it's nice to get the wheels turning on how to let others know about that said story or those said stories. And so it's really important to me to talk about, you know, or really design um, for campaigns or stories that are underrepresented or less heard about. Because we can design all day
Hmm.
for big brands and famous things that people also, they know quite well. Um, but it is important to, expand the canon of knowledge so that folks understand the whys or how we got to certain points, and it just didn't happen. Like, there's a person behind the thing, there's a story behind the thing, and and it's important for us, you, me, everyone else, to have a firm um, understanding of how and why, we are in certain presence.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think it's one way or the other, right? I think it's not like designed for big brands, famous things versus tell my story, right? Because I think the more, and this is my opinion,
Yeah,
right? If you feel like you have a different thought, by all means. But I think the more you open up and share your
yeah,
story, be more authentic, right? Just kind of reflect on who you are, what you feel,
yeah,
what stories need to be told. The more it attracts like-minded individuals or institutions or even brands, right? To actually connect with you in a way,
yeah,
right? So I think as creators, makers, educators, I feel like it's important for each of us to I guess be brave enough and actually proactively tell our stories.
yeah. And I mean, to your point, like, if a brand wants to be more familiar or feel more engaging, they do have to
Hmm.
meet the consumer, at a place of learning or a place of authenticity. Um, that allows the digestion of whatever they're attempting to sell, whether it's an idea or a product. For it to be thought of in a certain careful and caring way.
All right. So if you can challenge the audience to do one thing. I told you there was going to be some surprise questions here. What would that challenge be?
Man, that's hard, right? Like, you just turned 43. A friend of mine and classmate, Christopher Paul Jordan, is a painter, and he asked me a couple days ago, what have you learned in your 43 years of life? And my message to him was, it was many. There was a few things, but the bigger thing is to make room to enjoy the harvest, right? Like we work and we work and we work and we work, um, and sometimes don't take the time to really cut the fruit off the tree of the seeds, all the seeds that we've planted, right? Like, yeah, you might get you might have 5 exhibition design projects that you're working on, and instead of celebrating them after you've done the fifth one, you're like, this is magic number 5. You're just on to number 6. And so I was saying to him, like, yeah, in all of this time, like last year was, I mean, a crazy, tumultuously blessed time. I graduated from graduate school. My first kid graduated from high school. He got into his dream college. Um, we moved into a new house. Like, I did my first exhibition design in a museum. Worked on my first museum catalog. Like, so it's just a lot of stuff. And so it's like, oh, wow, I've actually been working. It's like realizing the things that you've actually wanted to do, the things that you've spoken about, previously, and they've actually come to pass. To sit back and actually take it in, to say,
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
like this actually happened.
So that will be your
Um,
challenge to
so yeah, it is. It's
basically ask yourself,
yeah,
or to ask yourself, or tell yourself to actually take a moment to look back and look at all the harvest if you
yeah,
just
yeah.
pulled,
Realize where you came from.
pulled off.
Like, where'd you start? Where are you
Yeah.
now? What happened in the middle? Like, and take inventory of it. I mean, many of us, yeah, we just moved through life. Like, I mean, where is your timeline? Is your timeline on your phone? In the iPhone pictures that you take? That's one, right? Is it through the emails that just pile up that go unopened, or the ones that you've replied to? That's another repository. Um, or if you journal, right? Like, many of us don't. But if you want to remember what happened 2 weeks ago, yeah, you can look at your phone and maybe you took a picture of it. Or you can go through your emails and think about, oh, well, what did I do, on this random Tuesday in March? Um, and so, yeah, a lot of the stuff, small things get overlooked, big things you just move on from.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth mining, because that relative history, has a bearing on tomorrow's outcome.
This has been so interesting, David. It's for me, right? The end of the year is when I start to count my blessings and failings. I think it's important to see it both ways, and at least have
Yeah,
some
yeah,
idea of where you want to put your effort into, right, in the coming years. Um, so yeah, I think that's a really good advice, and to always challenge yourself to find that moment to look back. And who knows, maybe you can throw the rope back, and you can help other people to get to where you are too.
yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, when it's funny, like when you are looking, it kind of gives you a perspective on who you were, and then you can speak to who you are and how you are affecting everybody around you in your orbit. And so, yeah, in a way, you are helping everybody else
Yeah.
by taking a glimpse at
Okay. Well,
at
with
you.
that, David, I want to thank
Yeah.
you for being a wonderful guest for me today.
No, yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everyone. That was our episode for the AMPM podcast. And as you know, we always try to connect with people in different time zones, trailblazers like David Jon Walker today. So thank you again, David.
All right, thank you.